The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe. This is the United Podcast Network.
Welcome to the Quirky Dog Podcast, inspired by some of the quirkiest dogs you can ever imagine and the owners who love them. This podcast is brought to you by the quirky couple themselves, Scott and Jess Williams. Their aim is to educate and entertain. Here's Scott and Jess.
Welcome, guys, and happy Wednesday. Today, we are going to talk about longevity. Longevity is a buzz topic in humans, and we are going to relate that topic to dogs here on this episode. But first, we're going to start with the quirky tip of the day. Wow.
It's a perky pig.
He's feeling strong. All right, our quirky tip here, Scott sent this over to me this week. Great tip. Xylitol, very dangerous. It's a form of sugar that they put in a lot of foods. It has a lot of other names that they're using, but most commonly right now, they're also calling xylitol birch sugar. So if you see birch sugar in any type of peanut butter or yogurt or something else that you would normally feed your dogs, be careful because that could just be another name for xylitol. Very, very bad for your dog, not promoting their longevity.
Well, birch sugar sounds much more natural than xylitol.
It does.
Xylitol sounds like an instrument.
It does. But just beware of these things. All right, so we're going to discuss today many different facets of what contribute to longevity in dogs. Obviously, our biggest complaint with dogs and our clients' biggest complaint with dogs often is that they just don't live long enough. You know, you love them so much. Some breeds you only get 6 to 8 years, breeds that you get 10 to 12 years. It always just seems too short. Very few breeds.
Definitely living shorter than they did 50 years ago, 40, 50 years ago.
And, you know, different breeds, you know, can live up to 18 to 20 years and everything else. But, of course, there's no guarantee. So what can you guys do at home to promote longevity in your dog, whether you just got a rescue or you're bringing a puppy into your home? What types of things will help them to live longer? So that's what this podcast is all about. We're trying to infuse longevity into your household. First thing.
Well, my first thought was if you haven't decided on a dog yet and you want to have a dog for a long time, look at the lifespan of the different breeds.
Yep.
And
size matters.
The small dogs all tend to live almost twice as long as the big dogs. So, you know, when I asked Jess to type in which breeds live the longest, and it's just a bunch of little Cavalier King Charles.
Well, that wasn't one of them, but Yorkies and Shiba Inus.
Small dogs.
Yeah, tiny dogs. Chihuahuas, dogs that can live up to 20, but they don't have as much weight to carry around. Their organs aren't going to be as large as the larger breeds. The larger you go up, the less of a lifespan they have. So,
and they also don't run into the TPLO surgeries as often too.
Yeah.
They can deal with, they're just not messing up their knees as much as a big, heavy dog.
So if you are considering this, genetics does matter. Genetics play a part. And if you have a rescue dog, you know, sometimes people talk about that hybrid vigor. Sometimes multiple breeds being mixed into a dog makes them healthier and be able to live longer because they didn't have all the predisposed, you know, singular genetic stuff that you may see in border collies or golden retrievers or cattle dogs or something like that.
If you're going to do a rescue, you might look towards a rescue that is 40 pounds and under, something a little on the smaller side. If you want a dog that's going to be in the house for 10, 15 years.
Yeah. And another thing, as far as genetics go, if you are going to be looking for a purebred, you want to go to someone who's doing some health testing. They want to be doing health clearances for, you know, things like cardiac issues and Dobermans. You know, this DNA testing now is available to us. I think it's really, really, really irresponsible to be breeding dogs right now without DNA testing. If you have, you know, a degenerative myelopathy marker in a dog and then you breed it to another dog with a degenerative myelopathy marker, you might have DM in your puppy. If they're both carriers, you totally could have a dog that has DM and you don't even know about it. Now that we have all the science to be testing these things, lean into your health clearances, lean into parents who have been, you know, tested with their hips and their eyes and surfed and everything else. These things do matter, especially if you're just embarking on your next journey of a new breed or another dog or something else. Genetics matter.
Nice the way you tied in embark for checking on DNA.
That is true. That is true. That is a good DNA tester, embark. Okay, so as far as the DNA testing itself, Paw Print Genetics has stuff. There's different things that you can search, but your breeders should be bringing this up to you. Your breeders should be doing this with the parents that they're breeding. This should be all happening before your little puppy comes out and is on this earth, and then you're following up and making sure that you're doing all your clearances that you're meant to do also.
Okay. So now, assuming you already have a dog, and you didn't pick the dog based on longevity, you just picked the dog because you love the breed, then how do we handle this?
Yeah, a lot of things you can do to promote longevity in your household today. Diet, I would say, is number one most important, and that's coming up a lot with all this human longevity stuff. What you eat, what you fuel your body with does matter. We are not up here to judge whatsoever, but everyone who's heard us or watched us before knows that we're very into a raw diet. We feed all of our dogs a human-grade raw diet, and we promote that 100%. We think it's the best thing that we can put into our dogs' bodies. Kibbles are not all created equal. Just because you feed kibble doesn't mean, oh my God, you don't love your dog, you're a terrible person, but you do want to look at those ingredients. You want to do your research. It is a billion-dollar pet industry for a reason. Kibble makes a lot of money. There's a lot of marketing behind kibble. Make sure you're conscious of what you're putting into your dog's body every single day of their lives. It totally, totally matters.
Yeah, and I would just say, not everyone can afford to do a raw diet, but do the best diet that you can afford on the budget that you have for your dog. That's all, instead of just going by the color of the bag or, because it has a Pomeranian on the bag, so that must be the best food for Pomeranians. Just take a half hour and just do a little research on these kibbles, because there's a lot of companies now that are rating kibbles. So you can just see where the kibble you're using falls into this rating category as far as quality and testing and all those type of things.
Yeah, no, diet matters 100%. And it's the one thing that you're doing every single day. Your dog is getting the same thing fueled into their system every single day. It does matter. And even just sprinkling some fresh fruits or vegetables on their food can make a huge difference. You can feed kibble, but Scott and I are huge into composting. We've really gotten big into composting for ourselves. I love throwing out less food. If there's something that the dogs can eat, if it's, blueberries that are turning or strawberries that are turning or Vital likes lettuce, my God, or spinach or something like that hasn't gone bad, it's definitely going in the dog's bowls before it goes in the compost. So it's a good way to save food that may be rotting, save your trash, and also be best for your dog. Another huge thing, and this gets talked about a lot in the human longevity stuff as well, weight. It does matter, you guys, and we have a huge obesity epidemic in this country specifically, but this world overall. And, the bottom line is, it was in Tony Robbins' book, Life Force, the less fat you have on you, the less places the cancer can grow also. The more muscle you have, the less fat, the less the cancer can form. And that does not mean that skinny people never get cancer or anything else. But the belly fat, the obesity issues, it matters completely. And it is the same for dogs. It's harder on their joints. It's harder for their mobility. It's harder on their organs. The heavier your dog is, the less you're promoting longevity. And they don't have to be rail thin. And especially as these dogs get a little bit older. Sing's going to be turning 14 here in March. Max, he's our doodle rescue. I think the dog is like 17. I try to have a little extra meat on their bones. I don't want them to be like this working weight that I would have expected them to be when they were, 2 or 5 or 7 or something else. But that doesn't mean that now they can eat whatever they want and they're morbidly obese, because weight does matter and it affects a lot of things in dogs, like their thyroid, if they're diabetic or not. Again, joint issues. If your dog's already prone to hip dysplasia, you definitely want to keep them lean. Very, very, very important component of longevity.
Yeah, and weight doesn't necessarily mean that your dog is going to live longer if he's at the ideal weight, but the quality of life is huge, which is another issue. But a dog that is in good physical condition has a much better quality of life than a dog that is morbidly obese, which is what I see all the time. And I've brought it up on other podcasts, but there's a Rottweiler that I take out for a walk a few times a week, and he was 162 or 160, mid 160s when I first got my hands on him, and now he's 142. And that dog can go, for a 30-minute without even taking a break now. He used to take 2 breaks on a 30-minute walk because I was afraid the dog was going to friggin' die on me. Now he can go out, do 30 minutes, do a mile and a half. He comes back, and he's decent. Like he's not collapsing when he gets into the house. Before he was so exhausted, he'd go lay down before he even got a drink of water. Then he'd pull himself together and go get a drink of water.
He likes the cooler weather as well. But you do have to realize that obesity is never going to promote longevity. So yes, it's going to be better quality of life if your dog's at a healthy weight, but you're also taking away years, if anything. You're never putting them on the larger the dog
on the joints too.
Yeah.
Then he can wind up having a hip issue or something like that.
Yeah. All right, let's go to break super quick. When we get back, we'll talk more about how to keep your dog alive longer.
Want to keep up with all the latest from the Quirky Dog podcast like me and Murphy here? Then make sure you head on over to the YouTube channel and subscribe. Or if you prefer to listen to the madness, go on over to iTunes or Spotify and follow the Quirky Dog podcast. And hey, while you're there, leave a rating and review and let them know what you think of the show. Until then, keep it quirky.
Okay, so we're going to briefly touch on this just because it's the way that we feel and everything else, but not over-vaccinating. Really big thing to consider when you're talking about longevity for dogs. Gene Dodds is a way better resource for this type of thing. Dr. Karen Becker, there's people out there that are doing research specifically on vaccines and how harmful they can be and everything else. And yes, of course, get your legal rabies. Of course, get your dog set up so they're not going to be getting lepto or distemper or something else. But these things where these 12-year-old dogs are going in and getting 6 boosters every single year, we don't personally agree with it. It doesn't necessarily contribute to their longevity. So vaccines is something to consider, and make sure that you're doing your research. You're talking to vets. You're talking to, maybe Eastern vets. You're really getting the whole picture before you just go in and say, yeah, give my animal XYZ if this is what you recommend. A lot of times these dogs are getting 6 to 8 boosters all at the same appointment. Very anti that, not good for longevity, and you don't want to pump a ton of crap in their system that they don't necessarily need.
And there are some states that accept the titer also. So you can get the antibodies tested before you do a rabies, for example.
Yeah,
and
the rabies titers so these days, but it's coming along. It's coming around.
There's not a lot of mandatory vaccines to begin with. No. There's tons of vaccines available, but there's not a lot of mandatory.
Yeah, and if your boarding kennel requires stuff like kennel cough and everything else, do your research. There's other places out there that may have less stringent requirements. When we had our big kennel, the only thing we required was rabies. That was most important to us, to have on file for the animal control officer and in case there was a bite and everything else. So do your research. There are other places out there, and it does matter what you're pumping into your dog's bodies, especially as they get older. Yeah,
and we have found that whether they get the kennel cough vaccine or not, they get sick anyway.
Yeah, so it doesn't matter.
It's kind of like the COVID vaccine.
Sometimes don't start.
Do 15 of them, you still get COVID.
Don't start. Sometimes, though, just like they say about the flu vaccine, you vaccinate for kennel cough, you may be more likely to get it. So just do your research, follow your heart, do what's best for you, but what you pump into your dog's system does matter. Similarly, pesticides, chemicals, heavy metals, toxins. Be very conscious of all of these things. If you guys track, I'm sure most of you out there don't track. It's not common that every household tracks, but AKC tracking, IGP tracking, everything else, whatever fields you're tracking in, be very conscious of what they're spraying on that grass. If you like to have a nice yard, we get it. Like nice grass, lush lawn, everything's beautiful. What chemicals you're putting on your lawn, what pesticides you're putting on your lawn, how you're keeping mosquitoes and ticks away and everything else affects your dog's system. It's going to affect their longevity. So there's definitely a cost-benefit analysis there, and you need to do your research on the front end. This isn't the type of thing where you can be like, oh, I'm sure it'll be fine, and have treatments for 3 years, and now your dog has cancer out of the blue. And I'm not saying there's always a direct correlation, but these things are not healthy for our animals. Like, it is widely known. Do a little bit of research, and you will see. Same thing with heavy metals. We have a well at our house. We tested our water. We had very high levels of arsenic in our water. We have a water filter now.
Not necessarily true. I had high arsenic in my system, but we didn't have the water tested that it was directly from the well.
Oh, that's true. I had Scott's heavy metals tested. But you can test these types of things do affect you. If your well water is going to be an issue, it could be affecting your dog. Heavy metals are not good for your dog. Build up long term, everything else. Toxins. What kind of toxins, what kind of chemicals are in your house? What are your cleaning products made up of? What do your dogs have exposure to? If you have an infestation of rats, is there rat poison accessible to your dogs? That isn't necessarily just a short-term thing that, if they get into it, it can be lethal right in the moment. But these types of things long-term affect the dogs and their systems and their chance to live a long, healthy life.
If you have rodents, my thinking is you want to make sure they're not in the kibble. Because that's a bigger issue where mice will poop in the kibble because they're getting in there and eating. Dogs eat that kibble. They eat a little bit of that mouse poop, and now they're catching disease that way, which you don't want.
So be conscious of these things. The cumulative effect of all of this crap can really take its toll on your animal. Stress. This is a really big one. People talk a lot about oxidative stress as it relates to the dogs, and that has to do more with like, are they getting the proper antioxidants and everything else? And we talked about putting food into kibble before. Some common things that are good for their antioxidant levels would be like carrots, broccoli, definitely berries, green beans, spinach, pumpkin. A lot of squashes are good. These are helping their antioxidants. This is helping their oxidative stress. Day-to-day stress matters. Oh my gosh, you guys, it matters in people. Stress takes a toll on your health. Stress takes a toll on your immune system. It matters with your dog as well. And I would argue, and I think both of us would argue, that structure is going to minimize the most stress for your dog than anything else. I don't care what methodology you're training in, but a dog who has clear boundaries, who has good structure, who doesn't have a lot of external thoughts about like, oh, I need to protect the house. I need to protect my mom here. I need to protect the car. I'm afraid of this because the train went by. I need to go hide under the bed and shake for 2 hours. This is not stress that you want building up in your dog's body. This is not helping to promote a long, healthy life for these animals.
Yeah, and I would say physical activity is a good way to burn off stress off your dog too. You're not going to, if they have other issues, it's not going to fix anxiety and whatnot. But just getting out, throwing the ball, letting your dog run and get that energy out of them so they can come in and just flop on the floor and relax is
giving them an outlet, just like people that like to go to the gym. And we say too, like, especially in the winter months, if you guys have a human treadmill, we're huge advocates of a treadmill. It's not always safe to go out and throw that ball. Condition your dog to that treadmill. As long as the belt is long enough for their stride, that is a great activity for them. It's mindful and they're moving their body. That brings us to, if you want your dog to live longer, their movement matters, right? Their muscle tone matters. All of these things matter. As soon as your dog can no longer get on the couch, their quality of life is changing. As soon as the dog can no longer get in the car, the quality of their life is changing. Do stairs. And I understand at some point, some older animals, that it is a prohibitive thing. They cannot do this type of thing anymore. But the more you get them moving, if you have a giant breed and they can't get in the car anymore, get them a ramp. Ideally, they had a ramp their whole life, but they're still going for rides. They're leaving their house. They're moving. Movement and muscle tone matter so much, just like with people. Everybody that sits there and, they don't get out of bed for 2 years, they have way less of a quality of life than someone who at least just goes to walk back and forth to get the mail every day at their house. These things matter. Movement matters for longevity and definitely for the dogs.
If you were in bed for 2 weeks, you'd see a huge difference in your muscle tone. I mean, it goes away fast.
Yeah, no, and it's the same thing for the dogs. And we just think, oh, they're older, they can't do it anymore. Well, what can they do? Like, put those little toe grips on them so they can still walk on tile floor. Do things to promote movement.
Let them do some searching games, a little hunting for food.
The more they're moving, the more they have muscle tone, the longer life they're going to have with higher quality.
And the more mentally stimulated they are, the more excited they are about living. If the quality of their life just sucks, they don't feel good, they're achy, they don't want to do anything, they're more prone to just check out and just say, I've had enough.
Yeah, a little doggy depression. All right, other things that are going to affect this, and we get this, and this isn't necessarily a universal way of looking at things. Where you live matters, right? New York City is going to be causing a different environment for a dog than dogs that live in, the countryside in Montana. Rural environments versus urban environments. That'll kind of tie into stress a little bit and everything too. But it matters. Additionally to that, where you live, access to vet care. Not all vet care is created equal. And I hate to say that, but it's true. Every DVM is not on an equal playing field. Some vets are, more skillful, more qualified, more knowledgeable than others. Research that. If you have a chance to decide between multiple locations, research where good veterinary care is, what the best quality of life would be for you and your dog. If you're like, I'm going to walk the streets in New York City every day with my dog, great, go live in New York City. But if you're a go hike in the mountains kind of person, make sure you're not stuck in New York City. These things really matter and affect everything. And Scott was mentioning, in addition to the quality of vet care in relation to where you are in location-wise, are you doing any preventative vet care? We are big on spending money when we don't necessarily have to be. Our older dogs are getting senior panels I would say at a minimum 2 times a year. Oftentimes it's more frequently than that. We're monitoring their organs. We're monitoring, are they a little bit anemic? Is something going on? Any white blood cells, any infection? These things matter. You don't need to do blood work every single month, but especially as the dogs age, get a good baseline. For Jimmy, he's had some hemangiosarcoma in his lines. He was getting ultrasounds yearly, multiple years in a row. We didn't do it last year because the TPLOs, there's enough shaving, there was enough stuff going on. But, we were looking at all of his organs. We were doing ultrasounds, seeing, is anything growing in there? How are things looking? Preventative vet care, sometimes it's hard to suck it up and do it, but it can have a huge impact on how quickly you catch something and prevent it from becoming a bigger and bigger issue.
Yeah, it reminds me of the pancreatic cancer where when you have symptoms, it's already progressed to a point that there's really not much you can do. It's just a very deadly form of cancer. But if you see it developing on the front end because you're doing checkups, then you can treat it. There's plenty of time to get on top of it, as an example.
Yeah, no,
hopefully.
The sooner you can get in on things on the front end, the better for the dog and its longevity for sure. And then, of course, lastly, and we totally get this, finances are going to matter. Not everybody can go in and see a doctor and they say, it's going to be a $10,000 surgery.
Do whatever it takes.
That's cost prohibitive. Care Credit is not giving out a lot of $10,000 credit card limit care credit cards. We understand.
Not to us, anyway.
We understand that it does impact how maybe long your dog can live its life because things do get cost prohibitive, especially in this day and age with vet care. But do as much as you can on the front end to promote a good quality of life, to feed a good quality diet, to get the dog out there and moving and keeping its range of motion and its muscle tone strong. All of these things are going to help you head off, ideally, bigger problems that may come down the road. Yeah,
it's longevity with quality. It's not just keeping a dog that should have died last year alive for another year for us. Yeah, no, we want as much quality as possible. So we hope that we gave you something to kind of think about, maybe build on or something else. We want our dogs to be there as long as possible. Losing a dog, it's one of the hardest things that any of us have to go through. We get that, we feel that, we've been there, but let's do what we can to promote our dogs living long, happy, healthy lives with us, okay? And if you really don't want to let them go, you can always do the cloning. Oh my God, all right, back to Biogen. 2.0. All right, you guys, thank you so much for joining us here this Wednesday. We so appreciate you being here with us every single week. If you need anything from us personally, feel free to write us at studio@thequirkydog.com. And in the meantime, keep it quirky. Bye, guys.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.